الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
So I preferred this style of gathering so that our conversation would be more intimate. It would be more of a family type environment. So I wanted us to be closer together. Because when we're closer physically, that's infectious.
Yes.
And it actually influences what? The hearts. The hearts get closer together. The Prophet ﷺ used to encourage his companions to stand very close together in salah. And he used to say, لا تختلفوا فَتَخْتَلِفُ عَلَيْكُمْ قُلُوبُكُمْ. He used to say, stand close together and don't be what? Don't be far apart from each other, because your hearts will also be far apart. And whenever he would go out with his companions, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim jami'an, they would go out on these expeditions, and obviously they would stop for rest. And sometimes they would stop to camp and spend the night. And when they would do that, people would do what people do when it's time to take a break from traveling. They would get out their cooking pots and they would make food. And what would happen is you have a small group, you'd have a small group of people eating over here, a small group of people eating over there, a small group of people eating over there. And the Prophet objected to that. He objected to that. He said, if you separate physically, you'll be separated spiritually. You'll be separated emotionally. Your hearts won't be together. And he gave them this very strong mo'ibah, this very strong admonition, to the point that when they stopped for camp the next time, the narrator said, you could have covered us all with one sheet. That's how close we were sitting together. And so I think it's important whenever we're able to be together in the same space that we try to push for that, because it will help our hearts to come together. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. But that being said, tonight is the inaugural lesson in what we hope will be a staple of our educational programming. And it is a segment which we have entitled Studying the Sermon. So basically, when we give the sermon, what we try to do is give an inspiring message and be brief. And what that means is that whatever we talk about, let's say we take an ayah and we make tafsir of it, or like we did today, we take a story from the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can't say everything that you possibly could say. And there may be many questions that linger in the minds of people about what was said. And so what the segment in the evening does, it affords us an opportunity to look back at what was said, look at it under the microscope, go through with a fine-tooth comb, and answer some of those questions and have some of those discussions as a community, as a family. So that being said, today our sermon centered around a hadith which was collected by Bukhari on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, in which he describes the conversion of a man by the name of Thumama ibn Uthal. And Thumama ibn Uthal was a very, very influential personality, a very powerful chief of a powerful tribe called Bani Hanifa. And we're going to see toward the end of the lecture, or the discussion, I should say, let's not call it a lecture, we're going to see how powerful he was. I don't know what the deal is. If anything happened to me during the khutbah, it sounds like somebody's balling up paper. I don't know if you're hearing that, you're picking that up?
A little bit, but not.
Okay.
It's not bothering me.
Okay, we'll keep going. All right. So that being said, we're going to see toward the end just how powerful he was and influential he was as an individual and his tribe was. But al-Muhim, this story occurs, or the incident occurred the 6th year of Al-Hijrah, as we mentioned, And a fellow member of the tribe of Bani Hanifa, is a very notorious character in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. He's Musaylim al-Kadhab. He is one of a handful of people who claimed after the Prophet emerged and professed his prophethood or his prophecy. He was one of a handful of people who also claimed that he also was a prophet and was receiving revelation. One of a few or a handful of liars and charlatans, false prophets. Al-Muhim, Musaylama was telling the people in his tribe all sorts of lies and slanders about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one particular man became extremely mashhoon. You know, the fire of enmity and hatred was ignited in his heart and couldn't be extinguished. And that was Thumama ibn Uthal. And so Musaylama basically told him, if you're so angry, show me how angry you are. Go and extinguish his light. What does that mean? Go and extinguish his light. Go and assassinate him. So Thumama said, I'll do that. Put on a disguise, hiding his identity, and went to Medina. Now the Prophet is unaware of the plot that's been hatched by Musaylama and Thumama. But he simultaneously dispatched some cavalry toward Najd to deal with a tribe that had become rebellious. And when that group of people were returning from their mission, they found Thumama. Just so happened. Perfect timing. They found Thumama sneaking around in the outskirts of Medina trying to enter undetected. And because there was the 6th year of the Hijrah, there still was what? A war going on between the Prophet, his companions, and the pagans. They were on high alert. Anyone looking suspicious will be what? Will be arrested out of an abundance of caution. So they arrested him. They likely interrogated him. And because the people at that time, they were not cowards, and they were honest. Even when honesty would not be in their favor. Thumama probably told them, I came here to kill the Prophet. That's why I'm here. And so they arrested him. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed the Prophet with wahy. Either way, by the time Thumama got to the Prophet's mosque, the Prophet knew what he'd come to do. And they tied him to the mosque so the Prophet could decide what to do. Interrogate him and decide what to do with him. I want to pause here because there's a couple of lessons here for us. The first one is that the disbelievers, the truth and reality of the Sunnah of Allah, is that there will always be this war between truth and falsehood, between the believers and the disbelievers. And the disbelievers, as part of their ongoing war against Islam and against the truth, will always do what? They'll plot. They will do machinations. They will devise these schemes to somehow get the upper hand over the Muslims. But when the disbelievers plot against the believers, the people of falsehood plot against the people of truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plots against them. And Allah is the best of plotters. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. The second lesson is that the Prophet and his companions, they were living a life of faith. They were very, very committed to their religion. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always looked out for them. He always protected them. He always safeguarded them from the threats that they knew about and the threats that they didn't know about. And this is the Sunnah of Allah, which means it's true fi kulli zaman wa makan. It's true in every time and every place. If we, brothers and sisters, if we believe the way we're supposed to believe and behave the way we're supposed to behave and worship Allah the way we're supposed to worship Allah, He'll protect us from the threats, the ones that we know about and the ones that we don't know about. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "In tasbiru wa tattaqu, la yadurrukum kayduhum shay'a." If you are patient, if you patiently persevere and you fear Allah, you keep your duty to Allah, you observe His rights, la yadurrukum kayduhum shay'a. Their plots will not harm you in the least. So the story goes on that the man was brought, tied to the pillar in the mosque, and the Prophet comes out. And he comes out to ask him. He says, "Ma indak ya Thumama? What do you have to say? Is there anything that you want to say? Is there anything you'd like to ask me?" So Thumama, he responds. You guys remember the response? He said, "Indi khayrun ya Muhammad, I'm optimistic. I expect good from you, Muhammad. In taqtulni taqtul dha dam. If you kill me, you will kill someone who has blood relations, and those blood relations will seek revenge." It's as if what? He's threatening the Prophet. And he thinks the Prophet is threatening him, so he wants to respond to a threat with a threat. "You can take my life, it's up to you. I came to kill you. You would be right to do so. But if you do so, it is a declaration of war. وَإِن تُنْعِمْ تُنْعِمْ عَلَى شَاكِرٍ. And if you are gracious to me and you set me free without a ransom, you will be setting someone free who knows how to give thanks." And this is also a threat and a promise. Because as we're going to see, he was very powerful, very influential. And his tribe controlled the trafficking of what? Of wheat. Was wheat something important at that time? Wheat, it's like petrol, but maybe like 5-10 years ago. Right? Oil isn't as big as it used to be. But there was a time where whoever controlled the oil, controlled the world. Well, kind of. You guys get what I'm trying to say. All right. That being said, wheat was a big thing. And as we're going to see, they controlled the wheat. And he's saying, if you are gracious to me, I know how to give thanks. I can help you. I can also hurt your enemies. Then he said, وَإِن كُنْتَ تُرِيدُ الْمَالِ فَاسْأَلْ مِنْهُ مَا شِئْتَ. He said, and if it's money you want, because a lot of people, when they think a certain type of way, they think everyone thinks the way they think. Everybody can be bribed. Everybody can be bought, right? This is what he's thinking. So he said, if you want to be bought, if you want to be paid, I'll write a blank check. You put in the amount. I can, whatever it is, my tribe and I can give you what you want. It's like the Prophet and him were speaking two different languages, so the Prophet, he left. He left him there. And he left him there for a day to think about it, to marinate. But in the meantime, he went to his family, his wives, and he told them, gather whatever you have. Food and drink. Give it to Thumama and treat him like an honored guest. I want to pause here and I want to ask you, what do you see here? What's that telling you? What meaning do you see? What message do you see in that to the Muslims? Mercy. Expand on that. Expand on that. You're right, yes?
Showing mercy instead of killing the
Okay. Expand on that. Be a little more specific, but you're 100% spot on. Yes. That we're basically being taught here to respond to cruelty with kindness, to meet ignorance with patience, and to confront evil with good. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ إِدْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Good and evil can never be equal, so repel evil with that which is better than it, meaning good. But also, I'm going to ask you honestly, does the Prophet have to treat Thumama like an honored guest? Does he have to do that? Doesn't have to do that. Just leave him there on the pillar. One day won't hurt him. One day without food and drink won't hurt him. He didn't just say give him something to eat and drink either. He said treat him like a guest. And so what that teaches us is that you can catch more flies with honey. It's like, okay, Here's a person who hates Islam, likely because of an erroneous perception about Islam. So what's the best way to correct that erroneous perception?
Show him the best.
Is it to what? To confirm what he already believes about Islam? It's what?
It's more like education.
Yeah, to show him it's not like what you think. It's not at all like what you think. And if you knew what it was, your perception would change and your position would change. You guys see that? Mumtaz. Tayyib. So he comes back, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the next morning. And he meets Thumama and he says, Mandak ya Thumama, anything you want to say? And you got to think, he spent, a day watching the Muslims, seeing Islam, seeing how the Prophet treated them. Maybe something has changed. He said, nothing's changed. I say what I said yesterday. In tunim ala shakir. If you're gracious, you let me go, I know how to give thanks. Prophet said, okay. Left him for what? Another 2 days. What's the wisdom there? What's the wisdom there?
Give him time so that he learns.
Ahsant. Learned how though? Did the Prophet sit there with a chalkboard and say, okay, look, this is the religion. This is what it is. Is that what the Prophet did?
No.
So you're 100% right. Dr. Ismail wants to give him what? An education, wants to give him da'wah. But what kind of da'wah did he give him?
Action.
Ahsant. Not the da'wah of talking. The da'wah of what? Of showing. Da'wah by immersion. But immerse you in what? In this Islamic environment. And let you see how Islam can change a society. How Islam can change lives. Can change murderers. With cruel and calloused hearts into people who what? Who weep when they hear an ayah from the Quran. And he's watching this for 2 days. And this shows us how important it is for us to be the people who call people to Allah by what? By our behavior. Not to be the people who say all the right things but do all the wrong things. Because trust me, our non-Muslim classmates and co-workers and neighbors, they're watching us. They're watching us. And they're paying more attention to what we do than they are to what we say. Like, ثم بعد ذلك,
Sheikh, could it be a question of this?
yes.
Could this be after the commandment came that الذين يطعمون الطعام على حبه
مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا.
Asira is the captive.
I'm not sure if it came before or after that. I have to double check. Yeah, but it definitely shows us that non-Muslim or non-Muslim, if they're a captive, because even asira is what? It's general. It doesn't mention Muslim or non-Muslim. It's general. Mumtaz, ahsant. And I'm glad you mentioned that because it made me think of something else. This qissa, this story, Khutbah Bukhari, is one of the proofs the scholars use to say, because there's a debate among scholars, can non-Muslims come to the masjid or not? And one of the proofs that the scholars use is what? This hadith. The Imam was brought to the masjid, tied to the masjid, stayed in the masjid for a period of time. And so this shows you that what? Non-Muslims can do it. Can come to the masjid, we can have an open house, etc. and so forth. So then after that, the Prophet left him for 2 days, like we said, da'wah by immersion. And after those 2 days, he came back, so a total of 4 days. He came back on the 4th day and said, Ma indaka ya Thumama? What do you have to say? Do you have anything to say? Basically saying, has your perception of Islam changed? Has your opinion of Islam changed? And Thumama replied, Indi ma qultu lak. I say the same thing. Nothing to add, nothing further. So the Prophet ﷺ told his companions, Atliqu. Let him go. Set him free. Anything strike you about that? Anything strike you about that? What do you guys see there?
It's a kindness.
Okay, certainly very kind. Because here's a man who came with the intention of assassinating you.
That also proves the prophethood.
What is it?
Prophethood.
Prophethood, that's not bad. What are you going to say, sister?
He's going to talk about the story. He's not going to lie because they were known about their honesty.
Hey.
They are not Muslims. So he's going to talk about the story. His people.
Which is not wrong. That letting him live, he's going to tell other people what his experience was like. And that definitely could have been a calculation of the Prophet ﷺ, one of his calculations. This will be told. What happened here will be told. The mercy of the Prophet of Allah will be told. The ikram, the generosity, the hospitality of the Prophet will be told. What he saw of the Muslims, their prayers and the transformation of individuals and the changing of their lives will be told. That's definitely true. Anything else? Tafadhal.
That threw him for a loop. So he did not expect to be let go like that.
And that might have been either the one thing that pushed him over the edge, or that might have been the final nail in the coffin. Like, I'm already convinced, but now I'm really one. I'm really convinced. Tafadhal, Sheikh.
I think most likely it could have been the understanding the psychology of how Prophet understand people.
Hey, there's no question. Master of psychology. There's no question about that. Let me ask you guys this question. What is the common perception of non-Muslims, especially extremely ignorant non-Muslims, of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? What do they talk about? What do they say about the Prophet Muhammad?
But he's a great family.
Okay, that's one. Something else that's more common with media.
He's a very aggressive.
That's it. Warlord. Aggressive. Went around the Arabian Peninsula, robbing and pillaging and threatening the other Arabs with the sword, become Muslim or I will what? Kill you. This is the narrative. Is that not so?
Even today.
Exactly. But the Prophet ﷺ, this action that he did is one of the greatest rebuttals or refutations of that narrative. Because if the Prophet ﷺ was a bloodthirsty warlord, I like to kill people. I like to shed blood and assert my power and strength and authority. He had him right where he wanted him. Is that not so? He could have ordered him to be killed, cut down right there, slaughtered like a sheep. Also, they say that he was a person, again, he plundered. He was just trying to do what? To gather more and more wealth and more territory. What did Thumama offer to do?
To give him all the wealth.
Exactly, whatever you want. I'll write a blank check. So if the Prophet was a person who was money hungry, he would have told him what? Okay, I'll let you go, but you're going to have to pay. So what did the Prophet really want?
He wanted to see the difference between a prophet and a normal human being.
Okay, that's Thumama. What did the Prophet really want? To accept Islam. And this tells you that the truly religious people, this is what they want. They just want the people to be guided. They don't want fame. They don't want name. They don't want power as if there is some type of diamond mine buried underneath our masajid.
He wanted to save another soul.
Exactly. He wanted to take him out of the darkness of shirk and kufr and bring him into the light of what? Of iman. This is what the Prophet wanted. And this goes to show you that the people who are truly committed to the religion, these true preachers, not the celebrity imams, the true preachers of Islam, what they are really concerned about is guiding the people. To the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Prophet as فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ إِنْ لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. He said, it's as if you were about to what? To kill yourself in grief if these people don't believe in the message. And a lot of the people nowadays who are actually preaching Islam, this is really what they want. This is really what they want, and sometimes they care more about the people and their salvation than the people care about their own salvation themselves. And so this is one of the greatest lessons that this story contains, is it shows you what the Prophet really was about. And it refutes the narrative, the common narrative that we hear about the Prophet being a bloodthirsty warlord, and he just wanted to pillage, etc. and so on. Nothing could be further from the truth, and nothing, you can't substantiate it. His record says otherwise. Does anybody remember what Thumama did after that?
He went to the next palm tree, washed up.
And did what? Tell me.
He got back to the masjid and declared shahada.
Declared his shahada, loud voice. And on top of that, he told the Prophet, before this, there was no face I hated more than your face, but now what? Your face is the most beloved to me. And there was no religion more hated to me hated by me than your religion, and now your religion is the most beloved religion. And there was no land more hated by me than your land, and now your land is the most beloved land. So, what this does is a few things here. Remember we recited the ayah earlier where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ, that good and evil cannot be equated, they're not equal. Good is always better than evil, so repel evil with that which is better than it, meaning good. There's a tatimma, there's a completion of that ayah, and this is a confirmation of that. What does the ayah say at the end? Anybody know the rest of the ayah? idfa' billati hiya ahsan فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. Subhanallah. It says, repel evil with that which is better than it. You will find that your most bitter enemy, somebody who came to assassinate the Prophet, became someone who said, I don't love anybody on this earth, that includes my mother and my father, my own daughter. I don't love them more than I love you. Yes, subhanallah. Look at that. From what? From that kindness, from that generosity, from that open-heartedness. Now, there's a part of the story that we didn't also. It confirms what we talked about earlier in the khutbah. Obviously, that was the big message that we had, was that when people don't know people and they don't fully understand them, that can cause them to be skeptical, that can cause them to have an aversion, it can even cause them to become hostile. And they can be hostile because of their ignorance of the reality of the person. They can actually be hostile to what? To the truth. And someone who's what? Bearing the truth. And this is why we have to be very, very careful. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may bring a person and cause their life to intersect with what? With our life. Because we are doing something, or believe something, or behave in a way which displeases Allah, and Allah wants to guide us. So He puts this person on what? On our path. Our paths cross, and Allah is giving us an opportunity to what? To learn and to grow, to find the truth and to follow it. And some of us, what we do is we miss that opportunity. We deny ourselves, deprive ourselves of that opportunity. Why? Because we allow our perceptions and our prejudices to what? To get in the way. And so we have to avoid making a decision about someone or something before we really know it, before we really understand it. We have to avoid making that mistake, because it's a mistake many of us make, and we deprive ourselves of what? Of guidance as a consequence. Now I want to close with, before we open up for discussion and any questions you guys might have, there's a part of the qissa that we didn't mention in the khutbah. And that is that after he became a Muslim, Thumama, he told the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I had intended to make Umrah, and I would like to continue and to fulfill that intention with your permission. So the Prophet permitted it. So he went to an Umrah, and it was clear for everyone to see that there was something different about him. Obviously, the way that the ritual was performed by the Muslims is different than the way that the ritual was performed by the pagans. There were some differences. And so I think they noticed by those differences and maybe some other things, how he was carrying himself, that he had become a Muslim. And what they used to say to people who became Muslim at that time, they wouldn't say aslamta. Did you become a Muslim? They would say sabota. Sabota basically means you turned your back. You turned your back on your forefathers, something like that. It's like an insult. So they said, asabota, ya Thumama, did you turn your back on your heels, or you turn your back on your forefathers? Did you basically throw the religion of your forefathers behind your back? Did you basically trample on the memory of your forefathers, basically insulting him? And he said, no. وَلَكِنِّي أَسْلَمْتُ مَا رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. He said, no, but I have embraced Islam along with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. This takes a lot of courage. He's doing it at a time when people would say that in Mecca and be beaten. People would say that in Mecca and be killed. Tells you two things. One, Thumama had a great deal of courage. It also tells you he had a great deal of power and influence. They were afraid of the consequences of harming a hair on his head. Then he said, and I also make you aware that not a grain of wheat will come to the people of Mecca unless the Prophet ﷺ gives permission. Again, shows you how much power Thumama and his tribe had. The point I want to make from this part is look at the courage. New Muslim, going to a place, a hostile environment where Islam is not welcome. Muslims are not welcome. And he stands in the face of these people and says, I'm a Muslim and I'm not going to give you any grain. This shows you how important it is for us in our environment, in our time, to have some courage, to have some intestinal fortitude, to be unapologetically Muslim at a time when Muslims are in a place where you have absolute freedom. Absolute freedom. Tell me something that you can't do. Tell me something you can't say. And with all of that freedom, what are we doing? We're apologizing for being Muslim.
We don't apologize. We come out to go up with our...
I'm sorry?
We don't apologize. We go out with our hijab. We show them that...
No, you're saying you don't.
We are strong.
You don't.
And we are brave.
But let's be honest, many Muslims do.
Yes.
Am I lying?
No.
Many Muslims do.
And we hide our Islam.
Many Muslims apologize for their Islam, hide their Islam. Many Muslims, you saw the people who came here for prayer. Is that all the Muslims? Is that all the Muslims who could come for Friday? How many of those Muslims don't come because they're afraid to ask? They're afraid to tell. How many of those Muslims go to work and their co-workers don't even know they're Muslim? How many of those Muslims will be invited to a cocktail party in a tent and take a drink, even if inside themselves they're saying to themselves, man, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm so ashamed. I'm so afraid. To stand my ground and to stand up and say, I don't drink. To tell a woman at the office, I don't shake hands. To grow a beard, even though a lot of non-Muslims grow a beard, it's in style, it's in vogue. This is a reality. This is a reality. We can't run from it. And yes, there are sisters and there are brothers who aren't afraid. They aren't, but apologizing for Islam is a reality and something we have no excuse for doing here. And things are not going to turn for us. They're not going to change for us the way we want them to change until we start what? Being a little bit more courage. Having a little bit more courage, being a little bit more courageous. Things are not going to change. We have to love our faith enough, trust our God enough to protect us. To do what? To be courageous. Courageous like what? Like this brand new Muslim, baby Muslim, infant in the deen of Islam, goes to Mecca, hostile environment, and says, I'm a Muslim and I'm not going to give you any grain. Allahu Akbar. And with that, brothers and sisters, we'll bring our commentary to a close. Are there any questions, comments or critiques. We'll take those until the time for Salat al-Isha. And we do have a good amount of time. Oh, no, I'm good. I got a little water here. I'll sip on this. Just like it looks good.
So,
Alaikum salam.
just remember one hadith, hadith al-Waqia, I can say. During the time of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
Allahumma salli sallam.
the Yahud were not believing the Prophet. So, some of these scholarly Yahud people, they sent one person to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to find out whether he is really a prophet or not.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You know, this hadith we still have.
Yes, yes.
So he came and he talked to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he cleared all his doubts. Then he went back to his scholarly Yahud, Jews, and he said, Wallah, by God, he is a prophet. By God, I will oppose him until I die.
Yeah, that was not uncommon. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about this hadith? How do you, if like that there are several people out there in this world that they know this is Islam is the correct religion. The practice is good, but still they oppose it. How do we respond to that kind of people?
How do we respond to them, or how do we respond to that phenomenon?
Yeah, phenomenon.
But the phenomenon is basically, we say, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us repeating the Quran, and the Prophet says on his part, taught us repeating the Sunnah, that guidance is in the hands of Allah. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a seal on a person's heart, no matter what he sees, no matter how convinced he is up here, he won't be able to embrace Islam in here. And this tells you the importance, if anything, it underscores the importance of the heart and purifying the heart, because the heart is the seat of spiritual intelligence. When we look at faith, it is not the intellectual intelligence that causes us to believe. It is a spiritual intelligence. It is the seeing of the heart and the recognition of the heart of the truth. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He tells us, He says, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts, but they don't understand with them. Those hearts are corrupted. Those hearts are sick. Those hearts are sealed. And so they what? They see good as bad, truth as falsehood, poison as what? The antidote, and the antidote as poison. He also says that the heart sees, it recognizes spiritual matters, or it fails to what? To recognize them. فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارُ وَلَكِنْ تَعْمَى الْقُلُوبُ الَّتِي فِي الصُّدُورِ. He says it's not the eyes that are in your heads that become blind. It's actually the hearts and the chest that can't see. And so this just shows the importance. When people are sick to their core, they won't recognize the truth. They won't see it for what it is. And this was not uncommon. When the Prophet ﷺ first came to Al-Madinah, he was greeted by the father and the uncle of Safiya bint Huyay, who ultimately became the Prophet's wife. He was greeted by them and a party of the Jews. And these Jews were rabbis. They were like knowledgeable people. And so they observed, they saw, saw the procession. And then they came back. And Safiya, she narrates what happened when they came back. And she said they came back like they were coming back from a funeral. They were so sad. And she said her uncle was saying to her father, and her father was saying to her uncle, Ahu, is this the prophet that's been foretold in our books, the one that we've been waiting for? Who? Yeah, that's him. He said, so what are we going to do? He said, we'll oppose him to our dying day. Because he's not from us, right?
Yes.
And another example of that, on the night before the Battle of Badr, the pagans, they encamped before the battle that night. And there was a cousin, if I'm not mistaken, a cousin of Abu Jahl. I want to say it was Abu Lahab, Abu Lahab. A cousin of his. He said, it's just you and I. Nobody's here. Nobody hears what we say except you and me and God. He said, before we fight this man, I want to ask you a question and hear your answer. He said, is he really a prophet? Is he really a messenger of God? And he responded, yes. He said, Muhammad lam yakdhib qat. He said, Muhammad is a person who has never told a lie in his life. Ayati al-an wa yakdhib ala Allah. He said, do you think he's going to come now and not just lie about the people, lie about who? Allah. He said, it's not going to happen. He said, so why are we fighting him then if he's a prophet? He said, because our clan and his clan, we've always competed with each other. They did this, they gave water, we did this, we had the keys, So basically we've always competed with them. Whatever they did to get sharaf, to get nobility, we did something else to compete with their nobility. Yeah, this is the time where everybody can go off. So we'll wait. All right. When they do that, they're bringing out the hook. They're like, hey, okay, that's enough. Talked enough. All right. So he said, okay, so why are we fighting him then? He said, because they competed with us and did this for nobility, and we competed with them to do this for nobility. And we were pretty much neck and neck. He said, if they have a prophet, where are we going to get a prophet from? So we can't accept that. They would have trumped us then. And so basically these are three examples, the example that you gave and these two other examples to show you it's not uncommon for people to know the truth and to admit the truth and still persist in their misguidance. Why? Because it's not the eyes and the head that become blind. It's the hearts and the chest. Yeah.
They did with the same thing with the Isa alayhi salam.
Allah understand why they took blood. Yeah. And so that's another, you can turn that on its head though. Because we should be so thankful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us. So thankful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us because we haven't done anything to earn or deserve guidance. Allah opened our hearts and made us Muslims. Like any other questions or comments before we close?
I'll make a dan outside.
طيب.
طيب
ممكن ما عندي مانع تفضل شيخ.
الله أكبر الله أكبر
الله أكبر
الله أكبر
الله أكبر
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله
أشهد
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله
أشهد
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله
أشهد
حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح
شدوا. تفضل شيخ. Okay.
First question is, Prophet saying you won't be a true believer unless you love them and yourself. So how do you do that?
What do you mean?
The Prophet saying
Yeah.
you won't be a true believer unless you love me and your children, the people, as well as yourself.
Yeah.
So how do you do that then?
I don't understand what you mean. How do you do?
How do you achieve that?
So basically, the brother asked Jazakallah Khair, he said, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. He said, none of you truly believes until I become more beloved to him than his own father, his own son, and all people. And there's another hadith where the Prophet, where Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he came to the Prophet and he said that you are the most beloved person to me with the exception of my own self. And the Prophet said, La ya. He said, no, this isn't enough. And so then he thought about it for a second and he said, Anta habba ilayya min nafsi. He said, you're more beloved to me even than my own self. And the Prophet said, Al-an ya Umar. He said, now. So the brother's question was, how can you achieve this? So the first step is always going to be to realize and recognize that this is the standard. Just like Umar did. You recognize it's the standard. And then you work toward it. And the more that you learn about Allah, and the more you learn about the Prophet ﷺ, the more your heart will be filled with the love of Allah, the love of His Prophet, and the desire to be compliant. And then once that happens, then that love of Allah and the love of His Messenger, which is an extension of that love, will eclipse any other love, even the love that you have for yourself. But I think it starts with what? Recognizing this is the standard. This is the standard. I don't think there's like a pill that you can take. There's no, but again, it's work that you're going to put in, and you'll get to a point where that is the natural state. And sometimes the real threshold that you have to cross is just understanding that this is the standard. You will not be a believer in the complete sense. Doesn't mean you'll leave Islam. That's not what the Prophet is saying, but you won't be a believer in the complete sense until you do this. And then once you know that that's the standard and you really want to be a believer that bad, then what? You will put everything. You will put everything second to what? To that. It will mean that much to you that everything else kind of pales in comparison to what you really crave, what you really desire. But it just takes a person getting to the point where this is what I want more than anything else. I want to be a true and complete believer. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the other hadith, which the sanad, the chain is in question, but the meaning is correct. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به. He said, none of you truly believes until his desires are in accord with what? With what I came with. And that's the thing. It's where you want to believe, to behave, to desire, to long for, to go after the things that please Allah. And whenever anything's on that list that doesn't please Allah, you work. You become so dissatisfied with yourself that you work and strive in earnest until what? Until you no longer want that thing. The last thing too, that's probably the most important in anything that we strive to do in deen or dunya, is a dua. We ask Allah. Even the Prophet used to ask Allah, Allahumma inni as'aluka hubbak wa hubba man yuhibbuk wa hubba amman yuqarribuni ila hubbak. Oh Allah, I ask you for your love. I ask you for the love of those you love. And I ask you for the love of the deeds that will bring me closer to your love. So we ask Allah, oh Allah, fill my heart with love for the Prophet. Help me to love him more than I love my own self. Yeah. Fellowship.
Brother, is it comments?
Let him get one and then you. If we have time. Fellowship.
Questions and comments or just questions?
Either one. Go ahead.
Okay, so commenting on what the brother said. When you look at it, the most thing that we should appreciate that Allah has blessed us with Islam. And there's a lot of people that have families, whether they were Muslims or not. Now, the best thing that we ever got in this dunya is Islam and the way into heaven. And Allah had gave us that with the Hidayah, and the Prophet gave us that with the message. So, as for we have to be more grateful to them. We have to be loving them for what they did to us more than we would love our family, our fathers, our parents.
Hey, Jimmy. Wait, Muhammad and then he had one more. Yeah, I'll come to that.
So the question is, the Prophet benefit when we send salutation on him?
Does he benefit? Benefit in what sense?
Does he receive blessings, peace and blessings?
The prayers that we send upon the Prophet are dua, and so certainly he will benefit from our dua. Certainly will benefit. I don't understand what you mean.
Even though he's in a high stage already, he still benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Inna Allah la yudhi'u ajra man ahsana amala. You had a question, I think.
Yeah. It's a question related to his question. Just try to part of the statement in the Quran. In kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'un. Does that apply to his question?
Well, as far as the cause and effect in that verse, Allah says, if you truly love Allah as you claim, then follow me, Allah will in turn love you. So it's more related, this is a means to attain Allah's love. But he asked specifically about how do you get to the point where you love the Prophet more than anything else, which is a little bit different.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. In reference to that, is that most of the time, learning the history, his seerah and his struggle.
Yeah.
We haven't had enough depth to understand different level of,
Yeah, the more you learn about anyone.
That's how, that could help us to understand it,
Yeah, I thought I had mentioned that, maybe I didn't. But yeah, the more we learn about the Prophet Muhammad, the more you're going to love him. The more you familiarize yourself with the Prophet, the more your love for him will increase. There's no question about that. If we know who the Prophet was, we know the sacrifices he made, our love for him will definitely increase. Are we doing 7:30? Is that what time we're doing? 7:30. Okay. Thank you. Just to go back to what you said, Muhammad, about the Prophet getting blessings, just remember, that the bounty of Allah is wasi. So the Prophet can continue to get what? Blessings, and his status can continue to increase. It's not like there's a ceiling. He can continue to increase. It's just like a person who gives sadaqah jariyah, some type of perpetual charity. And even after they're deceased, they can continue to get what? Blessings for that. And one of the blessings that the Prophet mentioned specifically that will serve as a perpetual reward for the person, or secure a perpetual reward, is he said, how does the hadith go? وَوَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُ لَهُ, and a righteous child that makes dua for him, that Allah will continue to be in his account and adding, to his account balance. If that's true for the everyday person, every time you say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, isn't that a dua? Yeah. So that'll do what? Continue to add to what? His waseed, continue to add to what? His account. Yeah. And there's no ceiling and there's no cap. And Allah's fadl, His bounty knows no limit. Any other questions, comments? Fadl Shaykh, one last one before we close.
Say something that, I wasn't born Muslim, and I was all, as I was growing up in the dunya, I could kind of feel that, that it wasn't true. That what was happening wasn't true. So my question that I finally got to was, what is the difference between the truth and a lie? And the difference that I found is that there's only one truth, but there's many lies. And if you're a seeker of truth, once you get connected to that, once you connect to that truth, the truth is Allah. And once I got connected to that truth, I couldn't deny it. I couldn't deny it, and I began to love it. Because that's what I always sought for. I mean, as a little child, when I found out that there was differences with races and stuff like that, it's like, that wasn't true to me. It was like, Johnny and me, we were friends, but they're saying, no, we can't be together. It's like, why? Lies. It's a whole lot of lies in the world. So, for me, the Quran has been the truth. When I read it, I was speaking with somebody about Christianity and Islam. And he asked me, did I read the Quran? And I told him no. So he said, well, read it. Give it a chance. And I read it, and when I read it, truth, you just recognize it. I don't know how to explain it. You just recognize the truth. And when it hit me, I knew that was it for me.
You recognize it because there was some purity there. Your heart was pure. But some people, there is a seal. There is a seal. There is blindness in their hearts, and they can read it and you'll see. I was where I previously worked. There was a book that one of the chaplains had, unfortunately. It said, the title, I might be making it some error, but this is basically generally what the title was: Searching for Allah, Finding Jesus. And it's about, as the subtitle says, a devout Muslim who became a Christian or something like that. Huh? Are you serious? I did not know that. I didn't get a chance to read the book. Now I might have to purchase it now. Really? He wasn't Muslim in the first place. Gee, they don't tell you that. So yeah, I just saw that, and I just what it says, that would not. Some chaplain might get that and give it to a Muslim, and he thinks I can convert Muslims with this book. That wouldn't move me. It wouldn't move most of us. It wouldn't move any of us, inshallah. Because we understand that the hearts are what? As the Prophet said, بين أصبعين من أصابع الرحمن يقلبها حيث يشاء. They are between two fingers of the fingers of the most merciful. He turns them in whatever way He wishes. And the Prophet used to pray. The Prophet, يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على دينك. He said, O turner of the hearts, make my heart firm upon your faith. Which means what? That if you're not attached to Allah, you don't make the dua to Allah, you can go from believer to it can happen. And that doesn't mean Islam is wrong somehow. It just means that you weren't fortunate enough to have your heart made firm upon faith. And we feel sorry for you. We hate it for you. And with that, we'll bring the session to a close and offer prayer. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.